Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Tuhami, and I am a training and development lead at VFC, and my pronouns are he and him. I'm really excited about this session. It will provide you, hopefully, with the insight on how to implement DEI in your organization. During this session, you will learn about what organizations need to think about and the questions they need to ask before even implementing DEI policies and processes. This session will also debunk some myths about DEI implementation and shed light on best practices. Finally, we will hear from Hootsuite and their implementation of DEI in their organization as a case study. What I mentioned would not be possible without our incredible lineup of speakers. Our first speaker will be Cassie Myers. Cassie, you can actually show your video to say hi, who is the founder of Lunaria Solutions, a DEI tech company. Hi, Cassie. Providing an intuitive platform for DEI education and analytics to organizations across North America. Cassie is based out of Waterloo region. She has her bachelor's from University of Waterloo in Peace and Conflict Studies and her master's in Cultural Analysis and Social Theory from Wilfrid Laurier University, where she did her research on the impact of racism and DEI initiatives on the visibility of Black women at work. Welcome, Cassie. Terrific to have you with us. We will then hear from Daphne Magna, who is a multilingual management consultant and founder of Tough Convos. Daphne transforms multicultural teams by helping them get uncomfortable and build deeper cultural awareness. She spent the past 10 years tackling diversity and inclusion for an actionable cultural intelligence perspective. She has facilitated thousands of tough conversations and learning experiences for Fortune 500 entrepreneurs, higher education, and communities. Daphne's advocacy work in human rights and as a founding board member of Black Professionals in Tech Network led her to create a safe space where allies of the Black community tackle tough issues and work towards eliminating systemic racism. Welcome, Daphne. Thanks for joining us. Following Daphne, we will hear from Naoufel Testaouni, who started his career in the nonprofit sector as general manager for ISAC in Morocco, which provides young people with leadership development and cross-cultural global internships. He managed ISAC expansion to Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. Following ISAC, Naoufel joined Microsoft Middle East and Africa as regional program coordinator, managing the software donation program for internet safety and security. Today, Naoufel is the co-founder and CEO of Queer Tech, an organization that aims to queer the tech ecosystem by breaking down barriers, creating spaces, and connecting communities to support and empower LGBTQ2S+ people to thrive. Welcome, Naoufel. A pleasure to have you. Hi. And last but not least, we will have on stage Gabriela Jordão, who is the DEI manager at Hootsuite, where she drives and manages Hootsuite DEI strategy. Hi, Gabi. Since joining the organization, Gabi has been working on enhancing and improving DEI programs already established and evolving the programs to meet the changing needs of Hootsuite's employees and business. Gabi has over 10 years of HR experience, having held several regional and global leadership roles. Prior to her role at Hootsuite, Gabi led DEI at Home Depot, Canada, and Dell Technologies, where she supported more than 5 countries in Latin America. A pleasure to have you, Gabi. A pleasure to have you all with us. And with no further ado, I invite Cassie to go on stage.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. And I believe I'm just waiting for my slides. And then I'll get started. But I'm looking forward to kicking us off today. As mentioned by Tuhami, my name is Cassie Myers. I use the pronoun she, her. I'm the founder of Lunaria Solutions, and most of my job is doing exactly what I'm going to be talking about with you folks today, and that's helping organizations leverage data as captured through our platform to make informed DEI decisions. And I don't know if I should see the screen now or if we're still waiting. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I think we can make it a full screen. Is that possible?
That won't be possible, unfortunately, because it's a PDF.
Okay.
I'll just run it like that. But I'll go to the next screen when you want to.
No worries. Okay. Well, you can go to the next screen. To really kind of ground us in this conversation, I want to start with a bit of an activity. And so I'm going to tell you folks a story, and I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and imagine what I'm sharing. You can go to the previous slide. And then I'm going to ask you a few questions and invite you to answer in the chat. So you're heading down the street on a hot summer's day. You are lost. Your phone is not working and you don't know what to do. You move towards a bank and you're sharply cut off. The person looks back at you and keeps moving. You enter the bank and the air conditioning hits you nicely as you walk in. You move towards a front desk and a security guard steps in front of you and sternly says, "Stop, we're closed." You apologize to the security guard as you're told to leave. As you leave, a teller stops you and asks if you need help. They give you directions and you go off on your way. Now we can go to the next slide. So I invite you folks, if you're comfortable, to just share in the chat. You interacted with quite a few people in the story. Who did you imagine interacting with in your head? And how did you imagine the people you interacted with? So what did they look like? What did they sound like? How did it feel? And I'm going to pause. I'm going to have 1 minute if anyone wants to answer, and then I'll kind of move forward. Okay. Well, you interacted with a security guard, someone who cut you off, and a teller leaving the building. And I do this activity because a lot of the times when folks go through this story, they picture a lot of the folks that they interact with to be of certain identities. So whether that to be a certain gender, to be a certain, to be appearing to be a part of a certain race, again, with not being able to know the exact details of someone's complete identity. And so I do this activity with you folks to show that even when we don't mean to, our minds are constantly making connections and assumptions about every person that we meet. And these assumptions are meant to protect us, but they can also make us biased against a person for no reason but their identity and to discriminate against them. And I do this, and I think this is one of the reasons why DEI data is so important, to really help us uncover what we don't notice and move past some of our false assumptions. And you can move to the next slide. So what is DEI data? So DEI data is really any information related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we can kind of understand it through those three terms. So diversity data tells us the demographics. This might be in a particular organization pertaining to their stakeholders. So this might include staff, volunteers, depending on the organization, board members, customers, suppliers, investors. Equity data tells us if those stakeholders have the resources they need to access what was being offered. So in a workplace, this might be actual employment, a volunteer roles, services, products, a contract. And inclusion data tells us if stakeholders feel like they're included in their interactions in an organization. And so next slide. To help us conceptualize this a little bit more, I kind of listed some of the broader themes that are super common among some of the surveys that people do through our platform. The first are demographics, a little bit straightforward. The next is leadership inclusivity, moving top to bottom. And that's, what are your interactions like with leaders? Do you feel like they're equipped to do this work? Expected behaviors and practices. So what do I do if I have a DEI concern? Is the process that's outlined safe? Am I satisfied with the outcome? Representation and advancement. So do I feel like I can grow within this organization? Am I satisfied with my compensation? Inclusion and belonging. So what are my interactions like with other team members? Do these interactions change in times of transition? If I make a mistake, if I'm not feeling too well? Organizational environment. So this might be online and how you're able to access your different team members. It might be in person, so accessing all the areas of the workplace you might need. Focus and commitment. So do I actually want this DEI work to move forward? How do I want to be a part of it? Do I feel like my organization is actually committed to this kind of work? And lastly, knowledge and skills is super common around, do I have the DEI knowledge to be effective in my role? And what kind of DEI topics or expertise am I looking to gain? And we can go to the next slide. And so there's a lot of reasons why folks might want to start off with collecting DEI data when launching an initiative. And I outlined just a few of them. The first is it helps design DEI efforts that match the needs within your unique organization. Recognizing there might be best practices that can transcend different organizations, but it's really the unique stakeholders that a DEI initiative needs to reflect. That goes into the second point, to create a reflective strategy that's framed with input from multiple stakeholders to ensure that decisions aren't being made in a silo and you're really taking the input from multiple people. To maintain accountability by measuring future progress against previous assessments or historical data points. So to really ensure that the initiatives that we're designing and we're implementing are actually having the intended goal that we imagined. And lastly, understanding the regional and industry influences that might contribute to the internal state of DEI. So I really outlined a lot of internal DEI data, but organizations' DEI work doesn't begin and end at the office, but it's really influenced by a wider society and industry that's really critical to frame as you design efforts. And next slide. Awesome. And so all of this is really good and well, but there are also some common barriers that people face to collecting DEI data. A lot of these are common to collecting it from your employees or team members themselves, so internally in an organization. The first is lack of psychological safety. So people might not feel safe actually sharing this kind of information. Unclear goals for DEI data. So you might not, without a clear goal, it can be really hard to decide on what format you're going to use to collect the information. If you're going to go external, if you're going to use surveys, if you're going to use interviews. There might be inadequate processes to apply the collected data. So sometimes a lot of companies have access to great information, but not actually the capacity or the plan to do something with it. And then the last one I'm going to talk about before I send us off to the next panelist is the oppressive nature of common data collection methods. So a lot of the methods that we use, whether interviews, surveys, focus groups, they're really meant to just give a reflection of a single moment in time. And sometimes if folks are trying to apply that data beyond that single moment in time, we can actually start to perpetuate falsehoods about individuals and try to put people in boxes where they don't actually fit. And additionally to that, a lot of historical methods that we use to do this kind of research, or the methods that we use to do this kind of research, have historically been used to oppress people and perpetuate further harm. Next slide. And so I aim to kind of leave you folks with just 3 practices to collecting anti-oppressive data to really think about as you go to do this kind of practice in your own organization. And I could speak for hours about anti-oppressive data collection, so this really just scratches the surface. And the first, you might have heard before, but clear informed consent. Beyond saying, yes, I want to participate, to how is my information going to be used? Why is it important? Who's going to access it? How is it going to be stored? And when am I going to be able to get something back, if I'm going to be able to? The second is multiple meaning makers. So oftentimes the truth is constructed and knowledge is oppressive. So when we construct knowledge, we need to be aware of some of the power dynamics involved and create knowledge that's in the interests of those who are being particularly harmed. And one of the ways that we do this is having multiple people make meaning of the data that we are collecting to ensure that their individual desires and biases aren't influencing the results, and we can have a little bit more of an equitable process. And lastly, participant-informed action. So the information that you're collecting from people should be used to design an action, and they should actually be involved in deciding what that action looks like. And they're involved in the entire collection process, from designing the assessment to completing the assessment to choosing the action and continuing that over and over and over. Okay, so that's my time with you folks. I appreciate your engagement. And again, this is just scratching the surface of data collection, but I think it's a really great first action as you look to implement an initiative.
Beautiful, Cassie. Fascinating. I I really find it super interesting, this angle of lack of psychological safety before even thinking about implementing the infrastructure for data collection. But I find it even more intriguing, the multi interpretation of data within an organization. That's super interesting. Have you had experiences with organizations who implemented this notion?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it sometimes isn't necessarily intentional. So even when we think of, if I'm a DEI manager, I finish my evaluation, maybe I'm doing external, maybe I'm also doing internal, I create in a single report, and usually just because of the hierarchy of an organization, it goes to maybe my committee first, or it goes to my supervisor first, and then they provide their additional input and it moves further beyond that point. But it becomes more impactful when that's happened a little bit more intentionally and from a decentralized framework. So not necessarily someone who's in a position of power to say, yeah, that's actually really great, but people who it's actually impacting. And that's where I think committees and ERGs can be impactful to do that work if they are being compensated accordingly.
Beautiful, super interesting. Thank you very much, Cassie, for your insights. And I invite next Daphne to join us on stage from Tough Conversations. Hey, Daphne.
Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? I know you can't respond back. It's unfortunate.
we can actually, so we hear great. People are feeling great actually on the chat. So you can see the chat.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
Go ahead. The tech
floor is yours.
Gentlemen, put the presentation on the first page, please. Awesome. Nice to see. Okay, so let's see who's in the chat. Well, the tech. There we go. Thank you so much. Nada, Justin, Niels, welcome. So, we don't have as much time as we would all like to discuss this subject, but I definitely want to say good afternoon and happy to see the few beautiful faces I can, but see your names in the chat, even if we're miles apart. I'm Daphne Magna, founder of Tough Convos. And, I've been having these tough conversations around DEI, culture, and racism for many years now. So I'm here really just to shed some light on what's working and what's not. And building on Cassie's presentation around what DEI data to collect and how. Next slide, please. So let's start with what we know and what we don't. Okay, we know orgs with more diverse boards and leaders make more profit, make better business decisions, and manage teams better. We know the data is important because without it, we're shooting in the dark. And we know that the data needs to be collected in an anti-oppressive way where there's consent, there's multiple contributors, there's quantitative, qualitative, and understanding the data is a priority, right? These are things we know. What we don't know is what practices, frameworks, strategies are going to work for us, our org. And there are several approaches. All have their merit, some more success than others, but most need to be customized to the needs and wants of a particular org. Next slide, please. So what most people in DEI would agree is that there are definitely some best practices, right? But there is a nuanced approach depending on so many factors about the organization you're working with, right? Where they are at in their DEI journey, what type of org it is, what they're struggling with most, what their culture is like. Is it a representation issue? Is it a lack of executive support? What is it, right? Yet, there are these things. There are things that we all would agree that are important, like using analytics to measure your efforts, like eliminating bias during interviews and hiring, or building a diverse supply chain, or listening to experiences of employees, or even investing resources in cross-training and upskilling and all of this, right? Next slide, please. After having these conversations for over a decade, I know that in order to determine the best way forward, it's really essential to understand your people. And from there, you can create a people first strategy, because those of us in HR, and this is a primarily people first conference, we know that people are the highest expense typically that a company has, and they are also our most valuable asset. And so we need to put them first. But this is where this idea came from, this idea of different yet the same. We're all different yet the same. We all have different goals and career desires. We all have different lived experiences and viewpoints, different talents and skill sets. But we all want to be valued, challenged, feel useful. We all expect our leaders to do what's best for us all in a fair, consistent manner. We all believe workplaces should be inclusive and welcoming and support our professional and personal growth. Agreed? The same goes for companies. They're all made up of people with different skill sets and needs and motivations. They have different products and services. They have leaders with different goals and leadership styles, but they all want to be profitable, attractive to talent, and leaders in their space. So why the obvious? Because this means your DEI strategy may or may not be the same as another org. You may have some similar metrics or none at all. You may have followed the best practices of other orgs and seen great cultural gains, and you may not have. So there are these several frameworks which depend on your company's needs, size, service, demographics, purpose, industry, existing personnel, right? All of that to say, the approach is where things take many directions. And DEI has to be worked into the fabric, the policies, the procedures, the culture of an org. And at Tough Convos, we thoroughly believe in an entire organizational approach, which to me is pushing down from the top and pulling up from the bottom at the same time. Next slide, please. So what do we call it? We call it a success journey, because we take this phased approach where we build a path that will result in success for you. It has to be top down and bottom up at the same time. You can't do this work without leadership accountability and budget. You also can't do this work without input from those who experience it daily. It's a combined effort of taking responsibility for your part where you have privilege and power, holding others accountable for their part, and leaning on those who have the lived experience, the understanding, the advice, right? So that's what we call our exploration phase. That's where you begin. Then you would move into your education phase where you enlighten people. This is where the envisioning happens of the better future. Then we move into our experiential phase where you start really implementing and putting things into work, into these testing and improving and iterating in all the different areas of your business. And then finally, you move into your evaluation phase, where you really can determine what's changed, what's working, what's not, and how to move forward. It's a significant feedback loop. It's a journey, and it's constantly evolving. Next slide, please. This is just to give you an idea from an organizational approach, all the different areas of your org that DEI should be touching, right? From diverse pipelines to recruiter training to culturally aware communication, sustainable wages for families, to making things for diverse audiences, to quality control is essential from a developmental perspective, right? And then your brand stories, going out into the community, building your ERGs. This is the organizational approach. Every division needs to be involved, but it starts from the top. So once again, that feedback loop, pushing down from the top with direction, support, budget, and pulling up from the bottom, because it takes a concerted effort for all these divisions, top and bottom, to be in sync. So I just want to end off with a few things that we're not going to do, okay? We're not going to hire for cultural fit, because fitting in and believing in the same mission and vision are two different things, okay? Oh, sorry, next slide, please. We are not going to incorrectly represent, meaning hiring South Asians to increase your colored employees, yet there being a lack in Black Canadians, or hiring Asians where there's really a lack of Indigenous women, right? Every group needs to be represented, and that is a really important point. Thirdly, not compensating or recognizing minority leaders, because they're usually the ones that are doing the extra work in ERGs, right? We need their lived experience to guide the efforts, but they need support to execute. They have full-time jobs, right? And then lastly, ERGs can do grand work, but not without budgets. Not adequately funding these projects are a hurdle for most. And the data shows that the lack in, productivity and higher attrition and loss in advertising spend is all related to some of these issues. So thank you very much for listening. I wish we could have chatted more. We will be able to take some questions at the end. Nope, that's the last slide. We will be able to take some questions at the end, but I just want to make sure that it's really super clear that leadership has to be committed. It has to take accountability, that many approaches work and you need something custom. But ultimately, it's a journey, because behavioral change is not the easiest thing to measure. And you need to be really willing to test the waters and see what works best for you.
Thank you, Daphne. It's indeed a journey, and fascinating to see the need for experimentation and customized strategy for every organization. Thank you for your insights. Now I would like to invite Naoufel from Queer Tech. Naoufel, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naoufel Testaouni. My pronouns are he and him. Really excited to be here today. Just a quick reminder, Queer Tech is based in Tech in Montreal, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are located on unceded land, unceded Indigenous land. The Kanya-Kainahi Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and the waters on which we gather today. So I'm going to go to the next slides. And just before I dive in, what I'm going to show you today and kind of talk to you about is a snapshot of a research study that we've been conducting that really going to give you three strategies or three ways how you can implement a step-by-step DEI strategy. So before I dive in quickly who we are, Queer Tech is a nonprofit. We started in Montreal, based in Montreal. We're Canada-wide. We had about 6,500 members across the country. And our mission is really focused on queering the tech ecosystem and really removing barriers for queer people to get into tech. Next slide. Our focus is really around three communities. We're looking to support people who are outside of tech and want to get into tech. We want to support our community to advance in tech because we want them to be at the table. As you've seen in previous from Daphne's presentation, we want to pull from both sides. So we want people on the top also to be supported from communities, have that diverse background so they can drive some of that strategy, and also have people coming in from the bottom. And then we're really looking to foster entrepreneurship within our tech ecosystem. So next slide. So the research we've conducted have really addressed three questions that we've asked ourselves in the beginning. The first one is, what is the lived experience of queer people working in Canada's tech industry? The second question is, how does the tech industry upgrade its work culture to better recruit and retain members of these communities? You can pause in here for a moment. And the third question was, what barriers need to be eliminated and what tools can be implemented to do so? So as you see, the first questions we've asked ourselves, and you can read a little bit some of the ideas, is what is the lived experience of LGBTQ people working in Canadian tech industry? This is data that we've collected from over 60 literature review. We've scanned about 4,000 documents that have been created in Canada around this topic. We looked at 61 documents specifically, and this is kind of some of the results that we had, and you can see that we can create a bucket a little bit. So, a lot of the queer people like to consider living, we call them step field or step jobs in general, because, there is a lot of them experience career limitations, devaluation and marginalization, institutional bias, and covert discrimination. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see how we looked at how could tech really industry adopt its work culture to better recruit and retain member of our communities. And next slide. So we the literature review that's been done, next slide. Yeah, thank you. Then the literature review that's been done a lot have really gathered around three topics. You want to look at how do you adapt your HR policies, how do you adapt the action of your colleagues, basically how do you become an ally and make your employees become allies to other communities. And the thing is, how do you adopt your policies for accountability and transparency, so evaluation reviews and stuff like that. So I'm going to go into each one of them and kind of give you some ideas on what you can do. So in order, adaptation of HR policies, some of them you'll be familiar with. Make sure you institute a non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies that you educate your employee on, so people can report when there are incidents. If you have no policies, people don't know who to talk to, and they end up not really sharing any of these issues, and you have no clue. Amend gender binary on forms. This is something we still see a lot of companies still use the Mr. and Mrs. and just you can get out of that and use the gender non-binary. So create really non-binary forms, provide diversity trainings. This is something that's really important. We really assume a lot of time that people know a lot of things, but they don't really, you can go back. Yeah, it's still there. People don't really know, like a lot of the things. So you want to do trainings. QueerTech delivers some of these trainings. We can talk about them. They're really supporting our partners that we work with. Institute gender neutral bathrooms. These are really important, easy also for a lot of companies have been doing that. Expand health insurance to cover partners and support, transition for trans people. Raise visibility for queer people in the workplace, so you can start emphasizing a commitment on equal opportunities as a recruiter. It's something that you want to say, write it in your job description and recruitment process. Create internal queer groups for support and networking opportunities. ERGs, affinity groups, are a really great strategy to do that. Match queer employees to mentors. A lot of times queer people have been left off or not having mentors. And so when you're a minority group, really try to put a focus on these groups. Encourage outness in management and supervisors. So many of our people in our community report that they don't have role models at work and really want to see more of that. So companies encouraging people to be out and be a role models for the community can really help. And develop leadership opportunities for queer people and employees. Next. So in terms of adaptation in the action of colleagues, these are really things, make commitment to diversity explicit and hold the same expectations for your partners, your vendors, people that you work with, and really talk about it through your social media. It's really important that you make it explicit internally and externally. Partner with and support LGBTQ affiliate organizations like QueerTech or any other LGBTQ nonprofit. These are great way to really learn from them, and they can support. There's so many trainings out there that you can bring to your organization. Create and support creator of product and services that benefits the queer community. This is also really important. You want to have people that are, if you are delivering to mass markets, make sure that your product teams have that diversity so you can really reflect on the population that you serve. And visibly engage with LGBTQ equality efforts and lobbies so you can advance queer rights. Don't be like Disney that says nothing until it's too late and now they have to deal with it. Really say something when you hear something, say something. Next slide. And then the third option is adaptation in policies for accountability and transparency. This is really important that we talked and Cassie talked a lot about use data points, right, to assess your employees, collect demographic data and any data. If you don't have data, you're not going to be able to act on it. And again, collect data that monitor inclusion efforts. Do it continuously so you see is your trend. Are you going up in your effort or is it going down? And so you can understand the issues. Also really create a clear path to progression and mobility within the organization. When you look at a lot of minority groups, you want to really focus on creating paths for them to grow to management roles. You know, there is only few people that rise to the top, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done to support this individual to get there. Use inclusive communication such as gender neutral language internally and externally on your job description. This is really important. This is how you foster that inclusive environment. And the third one is really consistently review all policies and practices affecting workers, and make sure that you maintain them objectively. And then last but not least, really have a clear performance review that's really structured, not around just the opinions of a manager, but that's really actionable and can be measured in a more neutral way, so you can really see the people that are performing. Next, yeah, so I'm gonna dive quickly. No, go back. Thank you.
To interrupt you, would it be possible to conclude just due to time's sake?
Yes.
Thank you.
So what barriers need to be eliminated and what tools can be implemented? Again, as I mentioned, there is a lot. Make sure you provide leadership opportunities, support diverse role models, increase visibility, and so on. Again, you can come on our websites on queertech.org. You'll find a lot of resources that we're posting there. And the last slide is just, choose to be part of a community. It could be our community or it could be any community that can help you achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naoufel. A great list of advice. I would like to give the floor now to Gabi from Hootsuite. Thank you, Gabi.
Thank you, Tahami. What a responsibility to come next from my colleagues. So thank you all for having me today. Really a pleasure to be here. We have been talking a lot about the importance of data. I appreciate all of the insights Cassie and Daphne shared with us. So I want to talk to you all today about how we evolved our DEI program at Hootsuite. And I'm gonna do that by taking you back to 2017 when Hootsuite hired a firm to conduct an assessment. That's when we started our approach with data. And we decided to do that because in 2017, we didn't have a dedicated DEI function. So we wanted to start first by looking at our current state to understand what was happening in the organization. So we really looked at how we were attracting, selecting, developing, and retaining our people. And we use a variety of methods to do that, including assessing our HR processes that we had in place. We used an anonymous survey conducted by our partner, and the survey was completed by about half of our population. And we've done quite a few focus groups. The results of the assessment were shared with the senior leadership team at Hootsuite, and we also share with the broad Hootsuite population. Now, I say all of this because creating a DEI strategy, especially for those new DEI functions, which was the case for us, requires a change management of mindset and approach. So for an organization to conduct a change of this magnitude is really, really critical to have your exec team close to you, senior leaders, also other senior leaders and key stakeholders. So everyone is fully on board and is able to articulate why diversity and inclusion is so important to the success of the business. I also agree with what Daphne said before, which is you also need the lived experience of your people so you can truly understand what is going on. And in fact, that's the reason why at that time we decided to partner with someone because we were in the beginning of the journey. So ensuring psychological safety, which Cassie spoke about it before, was really important for us. So the quantitative and qualitative assessment really provided an understanding of Hootsuite state. So we could get, again, the leadership buy-in and support to address these opportunities. So data approach was really beneficial for us because it helped us to design our strategy. And since then, we underwent 2 reassessments to understand our progress and uncover the persistent problems since the very last report. Through this process, we have been witnessing the importance of measurement, transparency, and really acting on opportunities so we can really follow through. Many of our processes have improved significantly because of the data approach that we have been taking, because it has been helping us to really prioritize. I want to mention a couple of examples just to be specific. Because of this journey, we were really able to see a great progress in our workplace culture. I will say that we have shifted from the early days of a tech organization that had a pretty much bro culture, which it did represent who we were many years ago, but it doesn't obviously represent us anymore. And really, we decided to do a self-ID campaign for the first time last year because of the journey that we have been through. We now believe that our people feel much safer and that they feel much more a sense of belonging in the organization, and that really enabled us to do the self-ID campaign. We actually tied the campaign with our pay equity assessment because the message was pretty much, if you want to participate in our pay equity assessment so we can assess if you're being paid fairly, perhaps you should consider adding your demographic on Workday. So it was kind of an incentive. And with that, the numbers of people who provided self-ID really had a peak. Self-ID campaigns, one example. The other great example is our DEI dashboard. So this journey has allowed us now to get to a different maturity stage at Hootsuite, because now we can analyze our data internally without having to wait to have a partner coming in every 2 years. We created the dashboard so we could really help our leaders to understand the priorities and opportunities that they have in DEI. With the dashboard, we can now have an open dialogue with the senior leadership team and understand their challenges and advise them on how to address. Good example of this is our leaders are now able to set OKRs tied to the opportunities that they have around DEI. And since last year, when we also introduced OKRs in the organization, every quarter, it starts at the L1 level. We have OKRs, and then it gets cascaded down until L3. So to sum up, for Hootsuite, what has been working well, and I highlight for Hootsuite because, as Daphne said, there's several approaches to do this. We have been taking a data approach, and it has been helping us a lot. But to sum up, we've started building a business case to justify through a quantitative and qualitative assessment why we needed to focus on DEI. We have also been super transparent with the organization and share really what's working well and especially what is not working well, because we're comfortable by having our team holding ourselves accountable to address these opportunities. It's okay to be vulnerable. And if anything, it's through vulnerability that you really learn the most and you establish trust with your employees. We have been working really hard to address the opportunities that we identify in DEI, but we all know this is a forever journey. If there's anything true in this space, that it is a journey, it's not a destination. So through the assessment and now the DEI dashboard, we can closely watch our progress and uncover any persistent problems. And as we evolved in the journey, we're now able to better influence the business. A good example of this is last year, we revamped our guiding principles at Hootsuite, and DEI is reflected in every single one of them. DEI is also part of our framework around who we do business with and where we do business at. And the two last things I want to say is this journey has allowed us to tie now DEI to our business goals, hold our senior leaders accountable for DEI by having OKRs, as I said before, at the corporate level. And with that, thank you so much. And I'm going to pass back to Tahumi.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gabi, for this insight and for this great case study. It really looks like mindset shift is at the core of what happened at Hootsuite. So before I ask you a question on that, I would like to invite the audience to send their questions for any one of the panelists, either on the chat or Q&A section. And in the meantime, Gabi, where would you say is the first a good step to start in order to change mindset within an organization to implement effective DEI policies? What would be a starting point for someone who's listening to you here on the audience?
I think you first need to connect with why you want to do this work. And a lot of organizations start from a compliance reason, and it's okay. But understanding the why for me is critical before doing anything. Once you understand the why, you can start having a conversation about the approach that you're going to take. From my perspective, really taking a picture of what is happening in the organization and using a data approach is a great one. But the step before that is definitely understanding the why.
Very interesting. Thank you, Gabi. A question for Daphne, who mentioned something interesting in her presentation regarding experimentation in DEI along that journey that you presented, Daphne. What would be good examples of experiments with DEI, if I may ask? I think you're muted.
Apologies. I think you're referring to the experiential. Yep, the experiential piece there. So there are many different things that companies can do once they've started, right? So the experience piece comes after they've educated themselves about exactly what Gabriela was talking about, the needs and the motivations and the specifics of that organization. Then you get into the experiential piece of training and workshops and management specific training for things like, this is something that I discussed not so long ago that I think is really powerful. And it's helping managers better have really productive one-on-ones with their team members, so that not only can they help them do better in their roles, but they're also understanding what motivates them more, right? Because not everybody needs the same types of benefits, for example. You know, there's this whole area around, what do I need to do my work the best? Right? And that falls under DEI from an inclusion perspective, because if I have different, things that are challenging for me, that should be a part of that conversation with managers. And managers are uncomfortable having those conversations sometimes. It's not something you go to school. People don't train you on how to have tough conversations. That's why I started Tough Convos. You know, it's really important skill.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Daphne. Unfortunately, we reached the limit of time for this session. Time flies with you, Cassie, Daphne, Naoufel, and Gabi. Thank you for your insight. Thank you to the audience for joining us and listening to this terrific presentation. and we wish you a great end of day with us, hopefully, and then the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Terrific having you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It was great to meet and chat and discuss more, hopefully in future.
Yes.
Bye-bye.